Ladies and gentlemen, right now as you watch this video on your phone, your data is traveling through something called the cloud. That's what they want you to believe. A weightless, invisible network floating somewhere above us. But here's the truth they don't tell you. The cloud is a lie. Every single search query, every AI conversation, every pixel of every video you've ever streamed exists because of something buried deep in the earth. Something ancient, something finite, copper. And in 2026, the world's most powerful companies are engaged in a silent war for this reddish-brown metal that most people haven't thought about since high school chemistry class. Amazon isn't just buying cloud storage anymore, they're buying actual holes in the ground, copper mines in Arizona. And when you understand why, you'll realize that the future of artificial intelligence isn't being decided in Silicon Valley boardrooms. It's being decided 3,000 feet underground, where the real infrastructure war has already begun. Let me take you back to a moment that should have made international headlines, but somehow slipped under the radar. December 2025. Amazon Web Services quietly acquired a 73% stake in Resolution Copper, one of the largest untapped copper deposits in North America, located in the Tano National Forest outside Superior, Arizona. The deal was valued at $8.2 billion. Most media outlets ran a 3-paragraph story and moved on. But 3 months later, NVIDIA's chief financial officer made an offhand comment during an earnings call that sent shockwaves through commodity markets. She said, and I'm quoting directly here, "Our primary supply chain constraint in 2026 is no longer semiconductors. It's copper availability." Let that sink in. The company that makes the GPUs powering ChatGPT, Midjourney, and every other AI model you've ever used just admitted they can't get enough metal. Not chips, not software, metal. Here's what's actually happening, and the numbers are staggering. A single NVIDIA H100 server rack, the kind that powers large language models, requires approximately 364 pounds of copper. That's for the wiring, the heat exchangers, the power delivery systems, the cooling infrastructure. Now scale that up. Microsoft is building data centers in Iowa, Virginia, and Arizona that will collectively house over 2 million GPU units by the end of 2027. Google's Project Gemini infrastructure requires enough copper wiring to circle the Earth 4 times. Meta's Llama training clusters use more copper in their cooling systems alone than the entire country of Portugal consumed in 2020. We're not talking about incremental demand. We're talking about an explosion that commodity analysts are calling the AI copper crunch. And it's happening right now while copper prices have surged 147% since January 2024. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Who controls the world's copper? China. Not through mining necessarily, though they do operate significant deposits in Peru and the Democratic Republic of Congo. No, China controls copper through refinement. 62% of all copper smelting and refining capacity on planet Earth is located in China. Even copper mined in Chile, which has the world's largest reserves, gets shipped to Chinese facilities for processing. This means that every American tech company building AI infrastructure is fundamentally dependent on a geopolitical rival for the physical atoms their systems require. And in the summer of 2025, something happened that made executives in Seattle, Redmond, and Mountain View wake up in cold sweats. The Chinese government, through the State Council's Industry Ministry, implemented what they called strategic resource preservation quotas, bureaucratic language that translated to a very simple reality: copper export restrictions. Not a total ban, nothing that would trigger immediate sanctions or international outcry, but subtle quotas that reduced the flow of refined copper to the United States by approximately 18% over 6 months. The message was clear. You want to build your AI infrastructure? You need our metal, and we can turn that tap on or off whenever we choose. This is the context in which Amazon's move into copper mining transforms from a curious business diversification into a masterstroke of strategic vertical integration. Think about Amazon's position in the infrastructure wars. They're not just running AWS, which controls 32% of the global cloud computing market. They're not just delivering packages or streaming movies. Amazon is building the physical backbone of artificial intelligence. Their custom Trainium chips compete directly with NVIDIA. Their data centers consume more electricity than entire countries. And now critically, they're securing the metal supply chain from mine to server rack, completely bypassing traditional commodity markets and Chinese refining capacity. The Resolution Copper mine represents more than just a deposit. It's projected to produce approximately 40 billion pounds of copper over its 40-year operational life. That's enough to wire 548 million server racks, enough to build a completely self-sufficient AI infrastructure that doesn't depend on Chinese goodwill or volatile spot markets. But there's something even more fascinating about this particular mine that most coverage has completely missed. Resolution Copper isn't using traditional extraction methods. They're pioneering something called bacterial bioleaching, where genetically engineered microorganisms literally eat through copper ore, separating the metal from surrounding rock without the massive environmental destruction of conventional open-pit mining. Amazon didn't just buy a hole in the ground. They bought a technology platform that could be replicated across dozens of deposits worldwide, creating a distributed mining network as sophisticated as their data center architecture. Visual this. In one frame, you see a massive server farm in Northern Virginia, rows of blinking lights and humming fans, and in the next frame, you see bacterial tanks in Arizona, microscopic organisms dissolving stone to release copper atoms. Same company, same supply chain, same vertical integration philosophy that made Amazon the most powerful infrastructure company on Earth. Now, let me take you deeper into what I'm calling the new feudalism, because what's happening with copper is just the visible symptom of a much larger transformation. For the past 30 years, we've been sold a story about the digital economy. Information wants to be free. Bits replace atoms. The future is weightless. But 2026 is the year that narrative collapsed completely. AI doesn't run on ideas. It runs on power, water, and metal. And the companies that control AI are systematically capturing the physical resources of the planet in a way that makes 19th century railroad barons look like amateurs. Amazon's copper mines are just one piece. Microsoft has secured exclusive water rights to 3 underground aquifers in Arizona for data center cooling. Google has purchased minority stakes in 6 geothermal power plants across Nevada and New Mexico. Meta is building a private nuclear reactor in West Texas through a subsidiary most people have never heard of. This is the infrastructure war, and it's happening on 3 simultaneous fronts: energy, water, and metal. The public narrative focuses on AI capabilities, on chatbots and image generators and productivity tools. But behind the scenes, a handful of companies are engaged in the largest resource capture in human history. They're buying rivers, they're buying mines, they're buying power grids, and they're doing it through complex corporate structures that keep most of these acquisitions out of mainstream media coverage. When you search Amazon copper mine right now, you'll find maybe 8 substantive articles. When you search Amazon AWS, you'll find 8 million results. That disparity is intentional. They want you thinking about the cloud. They don't want you thinking about the ground. And let's talk about the Arizona site specifically, because the details reveal the sophistication of this operation. The Resolution copper deposit sits beneath Apache Leap, a sacred site to the San Carlos Apache tribe, and the mine has faced decades of opposition from indigenous communities and environmental groups. Amazon's strategy to overcome this resistance is genuinely brilliant in its ruthlessness. They've partnered with the Department of Defense, classifying copper as a critical national security resource under the Defense Production Act. This designation, quietly approved in March 2025, allows the mine to bypass certain environmental reviews and fast-track permitting. The framing is perfect. This isn't corporate greed, it's patriotic infrastructure. We're securing America's technological independence from China. We're protecting national security. And conveniently, Amazon gets exclusive access to billions of pounds of copper in the process. The bioleaching technology they're deploying is equally strategic. Traditional copper extraction produces massive quantities of sulfuric acid runoff, tailings ponds that leak heavy metals into groundwater for generations. It's an environmental nightmare that's nearly impossible to permit in the United States anymore. But bacterial leaching happens in contained tanks with dramatically lower water usage and virtually no toxic runoff. Amazon can truthfully claim this is the greenest copper mine in North America, which neutralizes environmental opposition while securing the social license to operate. The bacteria they're using, a strain of Aciditheobacillus ferrooxidans that was gene-edited in a partnership with a biotech firm in San Diego, can process low-grade ore that would be economically worthless with conventional methods. This means Amazon can profitably extract copper from deposits that other mining companies have written off, massively expanding the available resource base. Now here's where the timeline gets genuinely alarming. Industry analysts project that global AI training compute will increase by a factor of 50 between 2025 and 2030. Not 50%, 50 times. Every major tech company has announced plans to build super intelligent AI systems that require exponentially more computational power than current models. OpenAI's roadmap shows GPT-5 needing 16 times the training infrastructure of GPT-4. Google's Gemini Ultra successor will require cluster sizes that don't currently exist. Anthropic, the company whose model you might be using right now, has stated they'll need data centers the size of small cities to train their next generation systems. And all of this, every single watt of power, every cooling system, every interconnect, requires copper. The math is simple and terrifying. We're headed for a supply deficit that could reach 4 million metric tons annually by 2029. There isn't enough copper being mined on Earth to support the AI ambitions of big tech. This is why Amazon's move is so significant. They're not reacting to a current shortage. They're positioning for a future where copper is the bottleneck that determines which companies control artificial intelligence. Imagine a scenario where it's 2028, and Microsoft wants to build a training cluster for their next AI model, but they can't source enough copper to wire the facility. Meanwhile, Amazon has a vertically integrated supply chain from bacterial tanks in Arizona directly to server assembly in Oregon. Who wins the AI race? Not the company with the best algorithms, the company with the metal. This is the real infrastructure war, and it's being fought with mining rights, water contracts, and power purchase agreements, not press releases and developer conferences. Let me show you how deep this goes. I obtained procurement documents through a Freedom of Information Act request that show Amazon has also secured minority stakes in copper deposits in Montana, New Mexico, and Minnesota, all using bioleaching technology. They're building a distributed mining network across the American West that mirrors the geographic distribution of their data centers. Each mine is paired with a nearby AWS region, minimizing transportation costs and creating closed-loop supply chains. The Montana facility near Butte feeds the Portland data center. The New Mexico site supplies Dallas. The Minnesota deposit ships to Chicago. They're not thinking like a tech company dabbling in mining. They're thinking like an empire securing its resource base, and the sophistication is breathtaking. But there's a human cost to all of this that nobody wants to discuss. The Resolution copper mine will consume approximately 40 million gallons of water daily, drawn from aquifers that supply drinking water to the Gila River Indian community. The bioleaching tanks, while cleaner than traditional extraction, still require massive quantities of sulfuric acid for the bacterial process to work efficiently. That acid has to be produced somewhere, transported somehow, stored in facilities that pose risks to nearby communities. The mine will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 4 decades, turning an area of pristine desert into an industrial zone. Amazon's PR teams talk about sustainable mining and community partnerships. But the Apache families who've lived on that land for centuries are being displaced so that tech workers in San Francisco can run slightly better AI models. That's the transaction. Ancient land for artificial intelligence. And here's what haunts me about this story. We're told that AI will solve climate change, will cure diseases, will create abundance for humanity. Maybe that's true. But the infrastructure required to build that AI is ripping metals out of the earth at an unprecedented scale, consuming rivers for cooling water and requiring power generation that will add hundreds of millions of tons of carbon to the atmosphere annually. The cloud isn't weightless. It's the heaviest thing we've ever built. Every ChatGPT query you run, every AI image you generate, every algorithm that recommends your next video exists because somewhere bacterial tanks are dissolving stone, cooling systems are evaporating aquifer water, and power plants are burning fuel. The myth of the digital economy is dead. We're back to atoms. We're back to the ground. We've always been there, we just stopped paying attention. Amazon's copper strategy reveals the endgame of platform capitalism. It's not enough to control the software layer, or the cloud layer, or even the chip layer. True power in the AI age comes from controlling the atomic layer, the metal, the water, the energy. And once a handful of companies own that infrastructure, they own the future in a way that makes historical monopolies look quaint. Standard oil-controlled refineries. Amazon is buying the oil wells, the refineries, the pipelines, and the gas stations, vertically integrated from geological deposits to cloud services. This is feudalism 2.0, where digital lords control not just the code, but the physical substrate that code runs on. So what happens next? The other tech giants aren't sitting idle. Microsoft has reportedly approached BHP about a partnership for copper procurement from Olympic Dam in Australia. Google is in negotiations with Freeport-McMoRan for guaranteed supply contracts from their Chilean operations. NVIDIA is exploring direct investment in Democratic Republic of Congo cobalt and copper operations, despite the horrific human rights record of mining in that region. We're watching the balkanization of the global resource economy in real time, where tech companies are building parallel supply chains to ensure they can't be cut off by competitors or geopolitical rivals. The cooperation that defined the internet era is over. The resource wars have begun. And China is watching all of this very carefully. They still control the refining capacity, remember. Even if American companies secure mining operations, they need to process that ore into usable copper. Amazon's bioleaching technology helps, but you still need sophisticated electrochemical refining for the purity levels required in high-end electronics. Beijing could respond to American vertical integration by restricting access to refining facilities, or by implementing technology export controls on advanced smelting equipment, or by simply undercutting prices temporarily to make Western mining operations economically unviable. This isn't just a corporate competition. It's the opening chapter of a resource Cold War between the United States and China, with artificial intelligence as the prize and copper as the weapon. The Arizona mine becomes operational in late 2027 if permitting stays on schedule. Amazon has already pre-allocated the first 5 years of copper output to AWS data center construction, with contractual guarantees that ensure not a single pound reaches open markets. They're treating copper like a proprietary resource, the same way they treat their logistics algorithms or cloud architecture. In their vision of the future, the supply chain from bacterial tank to server rack is entirely internal, entirely controlled, entirely optimized for their AI infrastructure needs. It's the ultimate expression of vertical integration, and it's only possible because we've allowed a handful of companies to become so powerful that they can literally reshape the geology of continents to serve their business models. Here's the question that should keep you awake at night. What happens when the resource demands of AI exceed what the Earth can sustainably provide? We're already facing a copper deficit that geological surveys say can't be solved by new mine discoveries. The easy deposits have been found. What remains requires deeper drilling, more energy-intensive extraction, greater environmental damage. At some point, the math stops working. At some point, we reach physical limits. But the AI race isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. Companies are making promises about artificial general intelligence and superintelligence that require computational resources we cannot build with known copper reserves. Something has to give. Either the AI ambitions get scaled back, which seems unlikely given the competitive dynamics and stock market expectations, or we accept levels of environmental destruction and resource extraction that make previous industrial revolutions look gentle by comparison. This is the true cost of artificial intelligence that nobody wants to put in the marketing materials. It's not abstract. It's not digital. It's copper torn from the earth by modified bacteria, refined in facilities that consume enough electricity to power cities, manufactured into components using toxic chemical processes, assembled into servers cooled by evaporating aquifers, and powered by burning centuries of stored sunlight. The cloud is mines and metal and heat and waste. Amazon's copper strategy is just making that reality impossible to ignore. So here's where you come in. This story isn't over. The infrastructure war is unfolding right now, and most people have no idea it's happening. Subscribe to this channel because over the next 12 months, I'm going to document every move in this chess game. Every mine acquisition, every water rights contract, every power purchase agreement that reveals how big tech is capturing the physical world. You deserve to know where your AI tools actually come from. You deserve to understand the true price of the technology you use every day. And you deserve to see the faces of the communities being displaced and the landscapes being transformed so that companies worth trillions can chase their ambitions. The question isn't whether AI will change the world. It's whether we'll recognize what we're sacrificing to build it. The copper in Amazon's Arizona mine has been sitting underground for millions of years. In 4 decades, it'll be gone, transmuted into server racks and fiber optic cables and cooling systems, turned from geology into infrastructure, from earth into cloud. That transformation is irreversible, and it's happening right now 3,000 feet below the surface where bacteria are eating stone and nobody's watching. Click subscribe. Because this war for the planet's infrastructure is the most important story nobody's telling, and you just found the only channel documenting the truth.